So welcome. So this is part of the Sacramento Spectrum, the Transitioning and Post-Mormons of Sacramento group, which many of us are a part of. Last year we did a Mixed Faith Marriage Fireside with Sean Davis. Dane, one of Dane's neighbors, Dane's not here, but so this is actually the second one that we've done. Dane is also, maybe he's here with a little late. So last year, I don't want to take up too much time, I'd rather hear from Tony, obviously, but last year I decided I needed to go talk to a therapist in order to come to peace with my post-Mormonism, and working with Tony was a huge help for me in getting me to a place where I could be at peace with Mormonism as the post-Mormon in our relationship. Helped me kind of move beyond the anger and resentment and betrayal stuff that I was dealing with, and be able to connect with my wife on those spiritual levels that we wanted. So I credit Tony for kind of giving me some of those ideas and tools. And so I was like, man, if he could share this with some of the people that I interact with in our group, that would just be amazing. So that's kind of where this all came from. So Tony, he's a licensed, I wrote this, Tony did not write this.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sitting down.
This is me just telling you guys, and a lot of you guys already know Tony, and I haven't honestly, and I laughed a lot of people before I even gave Tony a phone call, and everyone was like, yeah, Tony's an awesome guy. Because I was skeptical.
That's fair.
But Tony's a great guy. So licensed marriage and family therapist, certified mindful habit coach, speaker, author, podcaster, husband, father of four, ultra marathon runner. I had no idea you ran the Boston Marathon. Yeah, that's cool. If you could mute everybody, that would be amazing. I don't know how to do that. Oh, there we go. Someone did it. Thank you. Okay. Take three. Tony Overbay, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified mindful habit coach, speaker, author, podcaster, husband, father of four, ultra marathon runner, Boston Marathon. I didn't know that. I had to look that up. Grew up in Sandy, Utah. Sandy. Shout out to Sandy, Utah. Convert to the church as a teenager, stage 5 believer, and all-around good dude. So, it's all yours.
Okay, that wasn't so bad. That was not so bad. Thank you very much. Let me just stand closer.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there we go. So, boy, that is there are some chins there. And for those that are on the camera, though, I look amazingly thin in real life.
Very thin, very thin.
Thank you very much. The camera adds about 20 is what I'm looking at, and the angle up right there. I've lost my train of thought. No, I haven't. So Utah Mental Health Association asked me to do a presentation, and this is what I love about the topic that we're talking about tonight is the topic that so many people want to hear about. So first it was that church training, 3 hours, can you train all the therapists? And now in May, I think the conference is called Generations, and I'm presenting on stages of faith and mental health. And I said, sure, no problem. And it was going to be a panel. And now, as of Friday, they asked me if I could just do a solo. So I thought that was really cool, too. And then that one's also broadcast worldwide. So that's coming up in May. So I feel like, I kind of did it internal as far as church goes. And now in May, it's going to be to the world. So I love talking about this stuff. But I also want you to know that there's no part of me that feels like this is prescriptive or that I have everything figured out. And I want to say, and we'll get into that, your mileage may vary. And so I just hope that anybody listening doesn't feel like if for some reason this doesn't jive, that anything is wrong with them. And so, and we'll talk so much more about that as we get rolling. So I'll give you a quick version of my background. As Clarke mentioned, I grew up in Utah, a non-member. I used to have a lot of real cheesy jokes about that. Because there aren't a lot of non-members 30 years ago in Utah. So I know that I was every project. I was invited to every dance. I know now that I was in every youth council. I'm sure I was we got to get Tony going to church, that sort of thing. But I had an interesting experience where we dropped in the middle of Utah when I was in 5th grade. And we didn't know anything about Utah. My parents didn't. And my mom even said that at one point, we didn't grow up religious. And she thought that it was maybe even a sign from God to go to Utah, but she didn't know anything about Mormons. And so we had an experience where my mom and dad both, they smoke, they drink, very, very colorful language. And so they dropped in the middle of a neighborhood in Sandy where I learned later we were the non-member family that was there. And so that quickly led to everyone coming over wanting to convert us. And so they had an experience once where they were told that I would have been a great kid, had I been a member of the church. So they felt very angry pretty early on. And just very quickly, when I was 16 or 17, I even did a fireside with a friend of mine, and I was committed to baptism. And the jokes I love to tell about this are, I would show up at his house every Sunday night, and literally the missionaries were there, and I was naive, and I thought that's kind of ironic that they were showing up when we were having dinner. They had the time to talk afterward. They seemed very interested in talking with me, and so before I knew it, I was committed to baptism, and I did a fireside with my friend Trent. So it was, I remember I had to tell my parents, thought that was a good idea. I think I was 17, and it was the NCAA tournament. And I'm sitting there with my parents, and every game, every timeout, I'm thinking, okay, I got to tell them that I'm about to join the church. And I just started getting really nervous. And so then at one point, it was a couple of games in and I finally said to my parents, hey, so I think I'm going to join the Mormon church. And they just immediately said, no, you're not. If you do, you're out. And so I said, I will not be joining the church. And so at that point, I was 17 or so, and I just thought, okay, I'm not. I mean, that's kind of off the table now. And fast forward, I ended up going to Kansas. I tried to play some baseball at Kansas State. I had met my wife my senior year. She was a junior. And so she was active, and I was, I loved the Mormon girl. And so the church was still held a special place, even though I'd been told that I will not be joining by my parents. And so I go off to Kansas State, and I had this thing where it was a blast in hindsight, but I ended up going to about 20 to 25 churches in the span of about a year and a half. And I went to everything. Quaker, sat in a circle, talked about cool things. I went to Assemblies of God. I saw tongues spoken. I watched rock bands played. I saw hands raised. I mean, it was fascinating. And so I really didn't do a lot of the church or Mormonism there, but I had a contact with my wife back at home. And so then I moved back home, and after about a year and a half at school, because baseball wasn't going to work out, and we start dating again, and we're going to, at that point, I mean, most of our friends were 20, 21, so they're old timers. They're all getting married. And so I remember we one time just finally said, so when are we getting married? And it kind of seemed like the next logical thing. I was 20, she was 19, we were getting old, right, in Utah culture. And so we got married and thought we were just the oldest people in the world, and but it really was amazing. And we were in Sandy, or Murray is where we were, and we had an amazing time. But I was put into a primary, and I was supposed to teach kids that, oh, I got baptized. Yeah, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did get baptized. I mean, blew through all the missionaries, that kind of thing. Never really understood what was going on. There would always be two young guys. Every now and again, some old guy would come and would really talk very seriously about baptism. And I just thought, it's funny to look back at it. I didn't know what was going on. So then I get baptized, and we join, we're in a ward, and we were told immediately to multiply and replenish the earth, right? Start having kids, and then jump into a calling. And my wife worked retail. And so I'm with CTR 7s, I think is what it was, or Star 7s or 8s. And I knew nothing about the church at this point. And so when she would not be available, I panicked. And I still remember, I wish I knew who this kid was, but there was a kid there that not only knew more than me, but made me feel really dumb. And do you remember this at all? Yeah, okay. And so and so then all of a sudden I find that, I think I'm working on Sunday too. And so then, and I didn't even know that you probably were supposed to find subs. I mean, I know how that works now. And so we just kind of disappeared from the landscape. We moved apartments, and then we were in Midvale. And then I think we were lost at that point. Not lost, like lost sheep, but our records were lost at that time. And so then we graduate, we move out to Sacramento, and in Lincoln in particular. This was in 93, and I will still never forget this. I would love to know that Clarke as well. So at this point, I've got hair. I'm blonde hair, blue-eyed, just moved out from Utah with my wife, and I'm 21. So it's pretty solid that people are assuming I'm a very, very dialed-in member, I'm guessing. And so at that point, they say, hey, what ward were you in so we can get your records? And I had no idea at all. And I don't know if you remember this one, but so he just said, where are you coming from? And I think I said Midvale. And he said, what ward? And I thought, I don't know, 3rd? Maybe 5. Yeah, let's go with the 3rd ward. And then and he said, well, you don't know what your ward was? Or who was your bishop? And I was like, I don't remember. And then not knowing at the time, these weren't the best signals to give. And he just said, I'll find out your records or that sort of thing. I was called to be a young men's president a couple years in. I'd never been to young men's. I called counselors that knew all the things. I didn't know anything. And again, I found myself just like fading away. I'm working a lot, I'm traveling. So that was kind of my introduction to the church and as far as my activity level. I remember giving my first talk, and it was on few are called, but many are chosen. And I still don't really know what that means, but I remember I just kept saying it over and over with a lot of intensity. And I was very, very sincere about it. And then everybody says, man, that was amazing. And I thought, okay, I pulled that one off. And so for the next 10 years or so, that was kind of the direction that I went. But then I worked for 10 years for a computer software company here, and I think this stuff does start to play, even in my own faith journey. I didn't really know much about computers, even though I worked for a computer company. So I was doing things because that was what I was supposed to do, and then I start realizing, man, this is just not what I want to do or who I am. And so I went back to, I'd been writing a humor column in the area for about a decade, and we had a kid finally. We had gone 7 years or so. So we didn't really exactly follow our bishop's admonition, admittedly. And so I wanted to write a book about being a first-time dad, but I thought nobody's going to care about me because who am I? So I thought I'll go back to school, I'll get some letters behind my name, and I'll start writing humorous books. So I go back to school, and then about a year into the program, and at this point I'm in my 30s, like 30, 31, and part of the grad school experience is about a year in, you have to get a practicum, and you have to start seeing clients. I didn't know that. So at that point, I almost bailed. I almost said, okay, I don't want to do this. But then I also felt like we had spent some money. I had a year into this. So I start seeing clients, and I thought, wow, this is kind of fascinating. So I stayed in the computer industry, but I got a job part-time working for the church. And so at LDS Family Services. And this is where things got really interesting. I was handed, as a male therapist for the church, you can maybe even guess, I was handed pornography addiction, same-sex attraction, and faith crisis. That was the trifecta. And I don't know if it was maybe everybody else also said no thank you, but I said, okay, sounds good. And so as a therapist, I started working with that population. It was only about 10 hours a week, but I found that with when I was working with the church calling it at that time same-sex attraction, that as I'm working with people, I'm really starting to find that, okay, I just want to be as authentic as I can. So I remember kind of being trained once and given this formula that the people that I would work with would have, maybe there wasn't a strong father figure, there was a dominating mother figure, there was some abandonment, and then now the person's struggling with their sexuality. So first couple of clients I saw, that one fit the pattern, and then about the third or fourth one, I was kind of like, okay, so no strong male figure in the home. And they were like, oh no, dad's awesome. I'm like, awesome, but not around. It's like, no, he was around, Dominating mother figure? No. And so all of a sudden, this is when I first started getting to work with that population where people were just saying, oh no, this is just who I am. And so I kind of really started to identify that, okay, we are all just kind of who we are, and we're just trying to figure life out. And so I went on to work with, when I was working with the church, maybe 50 or 100 guys that were struggling with same-sex attraction. And that'll come into play here in a second. So then I'm working with people that are struggling with pornography and I don't even really like to call it an addiction at this point, but struggling with it as a coping mechanism. And so I'm doing all this behavioral training. And so I could do the behavioral stuff all day, call a friend, run outside, do some push-ups when you're triggered. But then I kind of really feel like, I felt a little bit inspired to look at these, I call them voids. And I found that people were turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms when they were not connected in their parenting, when they weren't connected in their marriage, when they weren't connected in their health or their career or their faith. So then I had these 5 voids that I wanted to work on. And so then I thought I need to find an evidence-based model to work with each one of these 5 voids. And that now things started getting passionate. So I found an evidence-based model for parenting. It's called the Nurtured Heart Approach. I find a couples model that is amazing called emotionally focused therapy. And we'll get more into that in a little bit too. So this EFT model, and now all of a sudden I actually enjoy doing couples therapy. When you get out of grad school, you just do a lot of empathetic listening. Tell me what you're hearing. And it's like somebody saying, I hear you that you're angry with me. And as the therapist, you would just teach people to reflect back, reflective listening. And then you kind of sit back and say, well, there you go, figure it out. And so I feel like even sometimes when we get into the mixed faith marriage, that's some of those tools that we try to employ. It's just, I hear you. I think you're wrong, but I hear you. So, and we'll kind of get to that more too, because I really feel like all of these things were just leading up to just being able to really specifically work with this population and love it. So I've got these voids. So there's a parenting modality, there's a couples modality, people's health, as Clarke mentioned. I love exercise, I really do, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to be a runner or that sort of thing. And then there was career. So I realized, wow, I was literally in a career I didn't enjoy, which then caused me to feel less than, or caused me to feel like what's wrong with me, which caused me to want to turn to coping mechanisms. Now mine happened to be a socially acceptable coping mechanism, like running, but I did this event around here for years. So I'd run around a track for 24 hours to raise money for schools. And I would go speak at the schools, and people would say, why do you run 125 miles? And I would say, so I can eat ice cream. But then I would go home and say, it's so that I don't want to go run into traffic. That's really because I felt like I really wasn't being who I really felt like I was at my core. And so then the final modality there is faith. So I feel like the final void is faith. So then I'm thinking, I really am not quite sure how to help people with their faith crisis or their faith journey. But that was one of the areas I was also working with the church. So the training that I was given had a lot to do with apologetics, if people are familiar with that. And I still remember the first book that I was recommended was one called Shaken Faith Syndrome. And that was one where the beginning of the book, it really does lay out a lot of the psychological pieces of things like cognitive dissonance, things where why do we hear one thing that we feel different about it. But then the second half of the book really was more in the line of apologetics. So, and I'm guessing most of the people are familiar with the apologetics, but in that point, I'm starting to get people into my office that are saying that they're having some real struggles with certain things about the church. And I'll just use, and on my training with all the church therapists, I really did, I laid out the apologetic argument around, let's just say, the DNA and the Lamanites and the Book of Mormon. And so the apologetic argument, I pulled it up from the Gospel Topics essays, and I said, if you're someone that doesn't struggle with that, the whole idea of apologetics is that, well, as long as there's an argument, we're okay. But then if you're somebody that is struggling with that, because of all the things that you personally bring to the table of curiosity of why that's important to you, when you dig into that apologetic argument, it doesn't really satisfy. It doesn't really scratch the itch. And on this training with the therapist, I read through a whole couple of paragraphs about the apologetic argument around that, and it just doesn't sound like it is satisfying if that is something that's important to you. So I found that the apologetic piece wasn't really working when I was counseling people that were going through faith crisis and faith journey. The apologetic arguments worked great for somebody that wasn't something that they were struggling with. And just that whole psychology of apologetics, I wanted to do a podcast on that so many times, because we even see it in the political realm right now, where if somebody, regardless of what side you're on, if you have your arguments and they have their arguments, you're just saying, but we've got an argument, so why would I want to listen to your argument? So that whole process of apologetics is a whole fascinating thing in and of itself. So from there, I just thought, I can't keep working with the apologetic argument. And meanwhile, I'm reading things and starting to think, oh man, I'm struggling, and they even, I remember one of the people that said, hey, do you want to tackle faith crisis as a therapist? And I said, absolutely. And I thought, nothing can rattle me, but then in the process, as so many people have when they're on their faith journey, I really would rather refer to it, is that as I'm starting to go through all this, I'm swinging from, no, I can explain this, to, is there a God? Back to, okay, no, I can totally explain this. To, and that's some of the things too, as a therapist, where you start realizing our brains are wired for certainty. We don't like ambiguity. We like patterns. And one of the biggest cognitive distortions out there that our brain does is black or white or all or nothing thinking. So you find yourself I just want to know, I want to know something for sure. And we don't like that argument that, yeah, maybe we don't know. We don't want that. Our brain is going to find out. Here's a tangent. So one of the things, I had somebody on my podcast that wrote a really fascinating article about COVID and conspiracy theories, and just the psychology around that I thought was fascinating, where she said that, our brain craves patterns and certainty so bad that the first thing we do is we look for cognitive bias, meaning that we have to at least agree with some of the things that we're listening to. And then once we have a cognitive bias, now we jump into confirmation bias. So now we're not only going to jump onto, okay, that makes sense to me, but now our brain's going to look for everything we can to back up something that we want to believe. And that's human. But then the more we do that, then the more there can be this divide between the two sides, or three sides, or however many sides it is. So I just thought that was really fascinating too. So at this point then, I got to find something that will start helping people with the faith journeys. And the first thing I ran upon was the Transcendentals, which is good old ancient philosophy, and where people would break things down into everything could be broken down into truth, beauty, or goodness. And this felt good. This was one of the first things I thought that felt good. At the time, I was a seminary teacher, and I taught seminary for 7 years, and I don't know the scriptures. I mean, and at the time, I couldn't say that because maybe I'll get fired, or maybe people make fun of me. I don't know. Something would happen. So I go through 7 years of this, and I cannot remember scripture stories. I mean, we were supposed to remember scripture mastery verses. People would say, is that the scripture that says this? I was still so insecure at the time that I would usually say, I think so. Even if I'm thinking, I don't even know where that book is. The Bible, Book of Mormon, I don't know. And I would always claim convert. And I even claimed convert 20 years into my conversion. And I think at some point I needed to let go of claiming convert as not knowing something. So these truth, beauty, and goodness was so fascinating because that concept is that truth represents truth claims and doctrine. Beauty represents music and conference talks and just things that bring you joy within the gospel. And then goodness, and I love the concept is that it's the people. And I think that we maybe all know people that it's the guy in elders quorum who doesn't really ever participate, but he'll go out there and move people all the time and actually enjoy it. Or he's at when you're doing the Pinewood Derby cars as adults. I mean, that guy is a goodness guy, Or me, people that are identifying that one, right? And then for me, I realized, okay, I'm not a truth guy. So the doctrines, the politics, that stuff to me, it doesn't really. I didn't find a lot of passion there. So and so when I identified that, I'm a beauty guy. I mean, I really did. There was a couple in my ward. They both passed away since, but they were both so just musically inclined that when for a while I was in a bishopric, and when there would be somebody doing a special musical number, you would just watch this couple. They were just beautiful to watch. They would close their eyes and just have a spiritual experience to special musical numbers. And I thought, that's what I like. And I remember one time when Wendy and I we would travel with our kids, and we would try to go hit a church or something. I remember being at a building near the Oakland Temple, and a lady got on, and it was someone's, she wasn't a member, right, their mother, and turns out later that she's a classically trained pianist, and she played a medley of hymns, and one came on, and it was something that I remembered from, I used to go to a vacation Bible school in the summers with my grandparents in Tennessee, and it was some hymn there, and I was bawling like a baby, because I can feel that right now. That to me was something. But then when somebody's telling me, well, the stick of Jesse or Levi or the things, the scriptural things, I don't know. Yeah, that one, and I remember just sitting there so many times just going, oh, hey, well, that's really interesting. And in my head just thinking, I have no idea what somebody's talking about. And I used to dread going into a gospel doctrine class and having somebody say, whoa, Brother Overbay, you're a seminary teacher. Tell us this obscure story from the Old Testament, to the point where I would find I don't even want to go because I didn't want that to happen. So truth, beauty, and goodness was a beautiful concept to me of being able to feel like I'm okay. Now, some of the challenges that I started to find, because I had a fifth Sunday lesson or a fireside where I would go speak about truth, beauty, and goodness, I felt like almost every weekend for a while. And when you are a truth person, and that is wonderful, if somebody's a truth person, oftentimes, I would be given this message of truth, beauty, and goodness, and I would feel like beauty and goodness people in the audience are almost in tears, and this is me kind of being maybe all or nothing, but I felt like a lot of the truth people were almost, you could see them just shaking their head, like, okay, this guy just needs to read his scriptures more and pray more. This guy is, the beauty and the goodness piece, that's a cop-out. But the more I'm working with people, and I'm talking at this point, I've been doing the therapy at that point a decade or more, hundreds of people through faith journeys, and starting to see things that I felt like really resonated. So I really feel like that was starting to, I want to jokingly say figure things out, and I need to take a drink of water. And I also used to have a friend of mine that would get the white things, the crusty things in his mouth when he would talk a lot, and I'm scared to death that I'm going to do that. Clarke, you're my man, right?
Okay. I probably need glasses, so I'm not even going to see him most likely.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, thank you. You're on it.
Maybe he's got you.
Okay, there we go.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
that's one thing that for Sabrina and I, like, that's one thing that resonates with me, because for me, I'm a truth guy.
Okay.
I'm all about
Yeah.
the doctrine. I want to know, like, it's black and white. What is the scriptures? What my missionary discussions say this. The gospel fits into that box,
Yeah.
right? And not everybody's got that box. And I know that's part of the stages.
I love it.
But Sabrina is not a truth person. I think she's more of a beauty and goodness person, you know. And I feel like you're saying, like, all three are valid reasons to be members and to connect, you know, with the divine in that way.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a big thing, is understanding that she doesn't have to be a truth person. In
No.
my mind, she needed, you got to be a truth person like me, and that's like the right thing.
Yeah.
But for her, she's a beauty and goodness. And I've become more of a goodness now. I'm an elders quorum guy that goes and moves people, but you won't see me at church.
Okay.
But
yeah.
anyway.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad you stayed there too, because some of the things that I don't have in my notes that I ran into is, I thought it was pretty fascinating. So that whole concept of truth, beauty, and goodness, especially when I was before I really got into stages of faith, if somebody then if they were a goodness person and they're offended, then you can kind of see that becomes a little bit of a all or nothing concept for them. Or if somebody's a truth person and all of a sudden their version of their vision, the truth is rattled, you know, when I was really working with the truth, beauty, goodness piece, before I really got into stages of faith, then that would be one where people would often then abandon the beauty and the goodness if the truth part of them was rattled. And so, it helped, I think, a lot of people at the time to really say, all right, you know, once I really felt like I don't understand the truth claims oftentimes, or they aren't as important to me personally, then I feel like I could be very, very passionate and comfortable with the beauty or the goodness. And so I feel like that was a pretty big thing for me. So thanks for bringing that up. No, I appreciate that. So there's a part where, man, I almost want to, it's time. So I'm going to hold off on stages of faith for 1 second, because I want to establish a little bit of then, and I had in my notes here, personal evolution, and now a little bit of therapy and psychology evolution, because here's the part, I'm going to try to slow down, and this is the part my wife said, remember, not everybody does this every day for a living and loves it and just thinks that everybody understands everything in my head. So I'm going to take a little breath. So let me start by saying, I want to say I just told you the all or nothing statements, but I feel like most every therapist is trained in grad school for a type of therapy called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy is that your thoughts lead to your emotions, and your emotions lead to your behaviors. And this is the basis of pretty much any motivational speaker that you'll ever hear. And it's and I think as I kind of lay a couple of things out, you'll start to recognize that you'll hear CBT things in a lot of things that you hear. A lot of influencers, a lot of the Instagram posts you see. The idea behind CBT is that, you know, you can just wake up in the morning and you're gonna make it today. I'm gonna choose to be happy, and I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna positive affirmation the crap out of my whole day, and it is gonna be awesome. And then you head to work and you get caught up in traffic, or you get a flat tire, or your boss is mad, or your computer won't start, you get a virus, whatever, and now you're mad. So now what happens is, okay, what's wrong with me? Because the posts I read say just be happy, and I did some positive affirmations, and I promised myself today I'm going to be happy, and now I'm not happy. So that leads to what the heck? I mean, what is wrong with me? And I did CBT therapy for 6-7 years. So I don't want you to think that this was a fly-by-night thing. I mean, I was a CBT therapist, tried and true. And the irony of this is that when I finally was leaving leaving employment for the church, difference, right? When I was leaving employment for the church and going out into private practice, I was scheduled to go to a training on something called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. So I'll just refer to it as ACT now. And I even remember saying to my supervisor, hey, I'm leaving, so you don't have to send me to the ACT training. And I was so grateful for this. Dr. Harris is his name, and he's long since retired. But then he just said, well, you're still going to be working with church people, so go to the training. And that training, it just changed my whole practice. It changed my life. It changed everything for me. And fast forward, it's been another decade since that time. And the data behind ACT is overwhelmingly, I don't want to say it blows CBT out of the water, because there are some really good uses for CBT. But let me kind of explain how this works. And this is literally, at that time, I was working with a guy, and I apologize, I tell this story all the time, but it was so profound to me. So I was working with a guy that had social anxiety, and so I was using CBT on him, and I go to this ACT training, and so the guy at one point had been 350 pounds. He's standing in front of me at about 180. And so, but he's got social anxiety. So the CBT version is when he would go into, he was a single adult. So when he would go into a single adult meeting, he would all of a sudden feel like everybody's looking at me, and he would panic and he would walk out. So as a CBT therapist, I'm saying, okay, your thoughts lead to your emotions. So your thought of everybody's looking at you leads to your emotion of fear and sadness, which then leads to a behavior of you leave. CBT said, so just flip it and say, change the thought. And there's really cute acronyms in CBT, automatic negative thoughts, that's an ANT, or your stinking thinking. And so you just change that thought. That thought is wrong, so you change it to, or they're looking at you thinking, that guy looks awesome, and that gives you an emotion of happiness and a behavior of you enter the room. And there are amazing books, and so you can, and there are times where I really feel like there's some good uses for CBT, but he's coming back every week and saying, what's wrong with me? I can't do it. I practice, I do the affirmations, he was doing worksheets, and then he goes into that environment, opens the door, they all look at him, he's like, they think I look awesome, they think I look awesome, and his own brain saying, no, they don't. They think that you really look bad. And so then he's like, and he leaves, and he feels bad. So what ACT says, so here's the difference. So ACT says that you are the only version of you that has ever walked the face of the earth, period. And that you are the combination of your nature and your nurture and your birth order and your DNA and your abandonment and your rejection and your hopes and your dreams and your fears and your insecurities and your attachment wounds. That's it. You know, Clarke and Wendy and Sabrina, that's it. That is you. And so you think and feel and believe the things you do because you are a human being and you're the only one of you that's ever existed. So it's amazing. I get the chills still when I talk about this stuff. So when this guy walks into this room, he had been 350 pounds as a kid. And so he had been made fun of. He had been looked at. He had been teased. Everywhere he went, people were looking. They were. It didn't matter if his parents said, you know, they're jealous of you because you are so confident, or they like your shirt or whatever. He's like, no, you don't understand. This is my life, my experience. So ACT says, you are going to walk into that room and they're going to look at you, and you're not broken. You're not crazy. You're human. And so now that you've lost 150 pounds, you're still going to carry that with you because that's your experience. So again, nothing's wrong with you. And so that acceptance piece is pretty profound. And I hope that you start to see where this can start to play into our journey, our faith journeys. And then we're going to get to how we talk about that with our spouses too. So you're the only version of you. And so all of that leads to your own version of what matters to you. Is it truth? Is it beauty? Is it goodness? Is it, are you a scriptorian? Do you have a great memory? All of these things are unique to you. And so when somebody's telling you, you just need to, nowadays, I love saying, how adorable, that they want to tell me what I need to do. That's so cute. I mean, it really is. I love it. I want to hear the suggestions. I would love to take them in. But ultimately, it's my journey, my experience. And so in ACT, what you do then is, so if his goal is to connect with others, if his goal is connection, social experiences, then, and here's what, this stuff gets so fascinating. So I'll slow it down. I really will. So I can go on 8 tangents. So our brain, again, brain is amazing, but your brain wants the path of least resistance. So let's do a little bit of neurology here. So your brain is duping you all the time. It thinks that it has this finite amount of energy to live. So every time that it can, it wants to make things a habit. I mean, think about that. When you don't even think about jumping in a car and driving or tying your shoes or anything like that, your brain has a little part of it called the basal ganglia, super nerdy, but it's the habit center of the brain. It's a little walnut-sized piece on the top of your brainstem. Fun fact, squirrels and fish, their whole brain is basal ganglia. It's all reactionary. So what happens with us is when we make something a habit, we put it into this little part of our brain. Why is that significant? Because you can do cool functional brain scans and see that when you're tying your shoes, you use 10% of your electrical activity of your brain. When you are trying to learn how to sing a new song, or you're reading some new complex thing, you're now using 60, 70% of the electrical activity of your brain. So right there, if you're kind of following where I'm going, it makes sense. Your brain wants to say, that's a lot of work. So can't we just pull something from the habit center, where it requires very little effort? So this guy has these years of a habitual pattern of feeling like people look at him and say he is overweight and nobody wants to hang out with him. So and his brain has now filed that away in his habit center of saying, that's what we do. It doesn't take a lot of electrical activity to feel like you are not enough and to feel like you can't go into these new environments. So when you start to go into that new environment, your brain's going to throw up all kinds of things of like, they think you look bad, they think you look overweight, they're making fun of you. And if it can get you to buy into one of those stories, then what are you going to do? You're going to leave the room. So acceptance and commitment therapy is so cool because it says you're thinking those things because you're human, but now what do you want to do? Well, I want a social connection. So what's your brain going to do? Hey, they're making fun of you. You're not going to have anything to talk about. They think your clothes look weird, all those things. And if your brain can hook you on one of those things, then you're gonna exit and go path of least resistance. You're gonna go and leave the room. So I don't know, you start to see where this gets to be so cool. So in acceptance and commitment therapy, now the next step is what are your individual values and what are your goals? And so, and I hope that you're kind of thinking about this from a term of I want you to start thinking about these spiritual things while we're talking about these psychology things. So if you are doing something that goes against what your value-based goal is, and I'll tell you, this was my whole 10 years in computer software. I was doing a job because I thought I needed to, and I should do it. And my dad, bless his heart, did 30 years for the same company, and you didn't like it, and you just go and you get your retirement, and that's what you do. So I'm like, man, I got to just keep going to work and not feeling passionate about it and not really enjoying it because that's what you do. Or if you are trying to do something spiritual, that's just what you do, and you don't have to like it, and you just do it, then these are called socially compliant goals. And in ACT, a socially compliant goal, your motivation is weak and ineffective because it goes against your own sense of self, or they say your sense of unfolding. So that concept alone, I think, is mind-blowing. There's so many mind-blowing things here that I hope that we're kind of getting at tonight. So a socially compliant goal, this is one where anything, it can be your job, it can be, even I get people that want to exercise. So then they say, okay, well, I guess I'll start running. But if they don't like running, even that becomes a socially compliant goal. And then anything that you keep doing, and you're thinking, man, what's wrong with me? This isn't jiving. Hopefully you can start to see, I'm trying to get rid of the whole what's wrong with me story. What's wrong with me if I don't feel a certain way spiritually? What's wrong with me if I'm not a truth guy? What's wrong with me, if I don't want to go, go attend some activity that really doesn't speak to me? So one of the first things that acceptance and commitment therapy does is that acceptance of you're the only version of you. And now the next step of that is what are your values? And this is one of my favorite parts of therapy is I got a little list of values and what the definitions are of a value. And each one of us has a different set of values. I've got a 40 value list. I've got a 60 value list. And so I love having clients, and I don't even like them doing it in front of their spouses because I give, and these are, like Clarke probably, I've said these examples too much, but take the value of honesty. So if you are doing this with your spouse and you say, yeah, honesty is not so important to me, that one is not going to go over very well with your spouse. But in the ACT view of honesty, if you grew up with two completely irrational, narcissistic parents who made up something new every single time, your value of honesty is going to be pretty important. And I will tell you, my first 10 years working with a software company, some days we go to a meeting and we were worth $10 million. The next day, $50 million. The next day we had 50 employees. The next day we had 10 employees. Got to the point where I had no idea what I could even say. And I was like our marketing director. I have to look at the CEO and say, what are we today? So I left that, and my value of honesty in my company was insane. I had started my own little hardware duplicator company. I made these forensic disc duplicators while I was going to school. And the first thing I put on my mission statement was, I will tell you that you do not need my product. I will do that. And then the irony is, the more I felt like I told people you don't need it, they're like, I'll take it anyway. And I thought, okay, that's crazy, But so honesty, the value of honesty for someone who had parents that were saying different stories all the time, then that person, that is a hard value, strong value. But if you grew up and your parents were brutally honest, you look horrible in those jeans, that was a bad talk, I think you're doing a horrible job. And again, if that's how they felt like that was a motivating factor, whatever it was, but if you grew up in that kind of an environment, then honesty, brutal honesty, maybe isn't going to be a core value. You may have more of a value of compassion, or you might or have more of a value of empathy. Or this is where I work with people who, some people have a real value of order. And for others, order drives me crazy because then I feel like I just can't keep up with order. So there's so many different values. And so once you realize, okay, you're the only version of you, you're human, you're okay, now dial into those values, and then you'll start to find that, okay, I need to start making goals that are in line with my values. And then that's going to be something I'm going to be passionate about. So if I am being told now to be this gospel doctrine teacher who is just, rote, methodically going through the lesson, and that isn't one of my core values, then I am going to do what is next called experiential avoidance. I'm going to look for any chance I can to not do it. I'll do it later. I'll do it when I'm not so tired. I'll do it when I get to the end of the week. So when you're doing these socially compliant goals and they're not based on your values, now you can start to see this is where I'm just going to keep kicking the can down the road. And that also leads to this feeling of what's wrong with me. So there's these themes that I feel like I'm starting to really build with people. And they also aren't just something that works for life, but they start to really come into play in people's faith journey. So, all right, cognitive behavioral, social compliant. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll get to the stages of faith. Empathy versus sympathy. This is one that I honestly spent a few years as a therapist kind of just nodding my head, not realizing the insane difference between the two. And again, hack bit that I do, but sympathy, you're walking down the road, somebody's laying there, they're in some big hole, and you walk by them and you say, hey, what's up? And they say, I'm stuck in this hole. And you say, that looks really bad. I feel super bad for you, but I gotta go. So that one's kind of sympathy. Empathy is I see you in that pit. I'm gonna jump down in that pit. I'm gonna stand right beside you in that pit, and I'm gonna say, all right, what are we looking at? What are you trying to get out of the pit? You trying to stay in the pit? Did you lose family members in the pit when you were young? What is this like for you? And so they're you're there, you're right there beside them. Or I did an interview in a parenting podcast today, and I talked about one of my favorite experiences in grad school was a teacher who said that, a bad therapist is one that stands on one side of the room and sees the person on the other side, and there's a bunch of chairs in the room. She did this experiment. And she said, okay, now, if you want to get over here, then, okay, go left, now go right, and then, okay, now jump over that desk or whatever. And then the person gets to the other side, and then the therapist gets to say, all right, you made it. How was that? And the person's kind of like, I guess it was okay. But what we want to do from an empathy standpoint is I want to go over there to the other side of the room and stand right beside the person and say, where are we going? If they're saying, I want to go to the other side of the room, then let's do it. And we get up to the first chair, and then we say, what are we going to do with this chair? Do you want to pick it up? Do you want to jump over it? Do you want to, what do you want to do? And so, empathy is really trying to understand what's going on in somebody's experience, and then how can I help them? And I was in this parenting podcast interview today. I have to tell you, I was rolling with this example, and I talked about, the person might even say, I think I'm going to stop here halfway through the room. And we still find ourselves wanting to say, no, you want to get to the other side, trust me. And then that brings up one more of my favorite things to talk about, and then we're going to get to the stages of faith. There's a term called psychological reactance, which again, another one of these game changers. And reactance is the instant negative reaction of being told what to do. So whenever somebody says you need to do this, or you should do this, I always say nobody wants to be should on, but you need to do this, you need to read this, you need to do this. What's our natural reaction? Anybody, when you're told what you need to do? No. Nope. I will not. As a matter of fact, I will do everything. What's that?
It depends on who it's coming from.
That's
like
a good
if
point.
it's from someone really, I'm like, all right, what do I need to do?
Oh, you're very kind. All right. Okay, right. I appreciate that. That's like, right? Build rapport and safe.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. So you need to pull out your wallet. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. But psychological reactance, and this came from, I was asked to do a training here locally with the new state presidency, and I literally started Googling. I wanted to find some evidence-based research because I knew I was going to run into people saying, what do you do when you know what somebody needs to do and they just won't listen, And I feel bad because you're going to hear this if I share there's some podcasts I've talked about this, but literally, I feel like I'm looking right here, but I want to look at the camera. There's nobody right behind it. I've got this wonderful, bless his heart, 60-year-old Elders Quorum president guy. He sets me up like perfect and says, what do you do when I've got this woman in my ward and she has 3 young kids and I tell her I know what it's like and here's what you need to do. And so I couldn't help myself and I said, so maybe things were different when you were a young mother of 3, to this guy. And he got the joke, which was nice. But I feel like that whole concept of psychological reactance, again, I hope you're starting to frame all of this in our faith journeys and that sort of thing, is how many times are we told, well, you just need to do this. The biggest one, you need to pray and read your scriptures more. On that one, it's like, okay, I will not pray for a week and I will lose my scriptures, And the psychological reactance is fascinating because it comes into play in our own brains. It's the whole thing behind thought suppression. So if you tell yourself, don't think of the pink elephant, your brain literally is like, I'm thinking about it right now, man, and there's nothing you can do. And this stuff comes into play in your parenting. I always say that, kids, teenagers, they are the masters of this. If you tell your kid, hey, I got paid in cash, champ, and here's $50, he's like, I don't want your money. You're like, I think you do, I mean, that just shows you how psychological reactance is so big. So there's all the things that I want to talk about. And now let's get into stages of faith, and then we'll kind of go into how a couple, I feel like, can communicate with another thing that I feel like is really important, something I've developed called the 4 pillars of a connected conversation. So let's get to the stages of faith. So James Fowler was a Methodist minister. He was a professor of theology, human development at Emory University. And so, I just have this for the GWiz file, because I told you guys earlier that in each one of these voids, I wanted to find an evidence-based modality. I didn't want to just say, hey, this sounds good. And okay, really quick tangent. Let me put a pin or button in the cognitive behavioral therapy thing. So the reason why I love ACT so much, I hope I've kind of made that point clear, but now we've got some pretty fascinating data that says that, so CBT, and again, most therapists are doing CBT, so I feel bad when I say that. I don't feel bad. I feel awesome saying this. But CBT is, you're starting with the, hey, you're broken, you've got automatic negative thoughts or stinking thinking, and now you just change the thought. It's called a mechanistic view of the brain. It's this view of the brain where you just change one part and then the rest of it falls into line. But so then you just change your thought to be happy, and then you'll be happy. So now we've got some pretty interesting data, especially with ACT, where it's now at 2,000 or 3,000 peer-reviewed journals, and I think a couple hundred books that are out about ACT now. But in CBT now we know that you're told, all right, your thoughts or you got stinking thinking, now just change your thought, you'll be happy. And then some of the outcome studies now we're saying to people, how'd that work? And if you're taking that outcome study and you're saying, okay, so my thoughts are wrong, I couldn't change them, but now I'm being asked, how did it work? I don't want to go 3 strikes of being broken. And so I say, yeah, that was great, worked great, And I feel like some of this is what's behind even so many people trying to find the next self-help guy, or the next self-help book, or the next motivational speaker, because you hear the thing, you hear the just be happy, just change your thought, just do this thing, and we go, I'm on it, that feels good. But then the next day or week or month, we go right back to, okay, but now, wait, that doesn't really work for me, because I'm the only version of me, and I've got all my own thoughts and feelings and emotions. So now it's like, dang, I got to find another book, or I got to find another person, or to get me motivated again. And so I feel like that's where ACT is so unique. So back to the stages of faith. So when I start learning about stages of faith, I really do feel like that's when things just really got exciting. So in Fowler's stages of faith, I'm going to talk about them, and I've got a handout that I can make available for everybody that I put together when I did the training for the church back in October. So there's the stages of faith are in line with there's a psychologist named Piaget, and it was his stages of development, and then one named Kohlberg, which is kind of stages, I think, of emotional development. So here's what the stages of faith are, and this is where I think things just got so fascinating. So stage 1 is it's called intuitive and projective faith, and it's generally preschool age children. So I want you to think of that projective faith, projecting your faith. And so in this stage, children mix fantasy and reality. And so this is where I feel like this is the projective is kids are playing with their toys, and you are saying, hey kids, there's a God. And they're just thinking, okay, but they're going to keep playing with their toys. Stage 2 faith is called mythic and literal, and this one's pretty fascinating. So when they start to they mix fantasy and reality, but this stage they're starting to form their basic ideas about God. And this is the one where I talk about this is the Batman, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, Jesus, Superman. So all mythical and all literal in this stage 2 faith. And so in stage 2, and it's generally around, it's usually like 6 to 12 or that sort of thing. And so some people, they say, can remain in this stage 2 belief, and I always think of Lenny from Of Mice and Men. So, and I realized later that's just me showing off that I read a book in high school, because there wasn't very many of them. Stage 3 is where things get real. So this is where it's called synthetic and conventional. And it generally is around 13, 14, and then kind of into adulthood. And many people remain in stage 3. And let me make a point right now of saying my goal is not ever to try to get anyone to get out of a stage 3 or to get out of 4. Or I don't think 5's better than 4 or 3. I really feel like these are just really a nice framework to operate from. So, and I am reading a little bit here from my handout. But so things really start to take shape from a faith perspective. So most people move on to stage 3 as teens. Their life has grown to include several different types of people and social circles. And this is where I talked earlier. Our brains love order and patterns. So there's a need to make sense of life. So when this happens, people normally adopt some type of all-encompassing belief system. Or then I just like to say, not in a dramatic way, but now the introduction of the concept of a box. And so the box contains all the beliefs that will get them through life. And this might, again, feel a bit prescriptive. But again, we've identified this is your brain craves this information. Patterns and answers and everything is in this box. So, however, people have a hard time tending to see outside of their own box, and they typically don't realize that they're inside of a belief system. And at this stage, authority is placed in individuals or groups that represent one's beliefs, and those in authority figures become the final say. And this is a stage that many people remain. And so, and this is why I try to lay all this stuff out, because if somebody's own experiences, their nature, nurture, birth order, DNA, all that stuff, if they're this need that we want for things to make sense and patterns and behaviors, if that works in a stage 3 faith box, then that's great. And I overuse this phrase. I say bless their heart. That is, and I don't mean bless their heart in a negative way. It's that then that's where that person is. They're in stage 3, and that is where a lot of people will remain. And a lot of times you hear people refer to stage 3 leaders. We had an interesting experience today with a leader, and the stage 3 leader. And it still can be a challenge, but when you kind of look at it from a bless their heart, that works for them, then I feel like that can start to change a little bit of the vibe, I guess, in interacting with the stage 3 leader. Stage 4 is called individuative and reflective. So, and I say here's where things start to get challenging. So this stage often will begin in young adulthood when people have been trying to fit inside of a stage 3 box. And for a variety of reasons, the box maybe doesn't provide the comfort or the relief. And as a therapist, this is where I really start to get people that are saying, and now this is why I laid so much groundwork on the concept of the what's wrong with me. So I don't find the what's wrong with me story helping as a therapist. I mean, I don't. And so when people start to think, man, I've tried to fit in that box, but what's wrong with me? Their family dynamic is different. They're struggling with their sexuality. When it's adults, if there's somebody that's had an addiction or a spouse has died or there's been infidelity or any of these things, now all of a sudden the box, maybe things don't fit as neatly in the box, and so people start to think, what's wrong with me? But then a stage 3 leader may, again, so bless their heart, that's where they might be saying, especially one who is steeped in that truth as a truth, beauty, goodness person, now their prescription might be, hey, just have faith, just read your scriptures, just pray more. Without understanding that a lot of times for somebody who has been struggling in the box, they've been doing that for a long time. And that's why, as a therapist, when I started working with faith journeys, I would get people that would come in and they're basically in this stage 4 where they're saying, oh, just try to give me a talk to read, or just I dare you to say, pray more and read your scriptures. And I'm saying, I'm not going to do that. I mean, that's not going to help. I do feel like when I was working for the church that there were, and this is where I love having this opportunity to train 360 therapists for the church in October, is, I got so much good feedback from people that were saying, hey, thanks for even just knowing there's a way to talk about this different, which I thought was so fascinating. But so when we start questioning or what's wrong with me, they may question the directions given from the box. This leads to people starting to look outside of the box and realizing that there are other boxes. And they often critically examine their beliefs on their own, and they often become angry or disillusioned with their former faith. And the irony here is that the people in stage 3 often feel that the people in stage 4 then have been led astray, or it's apostate, without knowing that the stage 4 person's struggles truly have been, they've taken time. I mean, this is somebody that's really, oftentimes we've wanted to stay in the box. And that's where it's like, but what's wrong with me? Why can't I? And so with stage 4, the person starts feeling like, wait, now that I'm out of the box, I can start to move out of this what's wrong with me story that my brain keeps telling me. And at this stage, though, that's where it's hard for either the stage 3 or the stage 4 person to avoid the all or nothing thinking. So the stage 3 person is often saying, don't read the stuff, and the stage 4 person is saying, that's the only thing that made me feel like I'm not crazy. So maybe you should read the stuff. And now 3 and 4 can have a little bit of a challenge. And I think that can be really hard. And
challenge is a mild way to put it.
It is, right? Filibuster for me, Clarke. I got a drink. Okay.
I refer to it as dropping an atom bomb on each other.
I used to do the burn the village behind me theory. Yeah.
You did it on me. I did not.
I did it on you, and then you were.
I have to do some therapy with Sabrina and Clarke. So let's pause here.
It's definitely my fault.
There you go. Not a guy, Clarke. Yeah, we've done well. But what can, and there are some things that I have, this is where I can really start to feel like I have, now my ego is getting a bit big, where I'm going to say, I may even allow you to hear some new material this evening. But I've been thinking about this so much I've worked with a lot of people that I have worked with kind of through stage 4, because again, my job, I'm right there beside him. I'm not over on the other side saying, well, you just got to do this and you just got to do that. That doesn't work. Because we got psychological reactance, we got everybody's own individual experiences, and all those things. So I love doing the faith journey work. I really do. But oftentimes I will see people that, and here's where I start introducing this concept. We all, gosh, I could go another hour on this. So in ACT, there's some really cool stuff that talks about how we're designed we want a sense of community. We want to belong. We want to know that we matter. And that's an evolutionary biological thing, because if we are booted out of our tribe and our brains, we're going to get eaten by woolly mammoths or saber-toothed tigers or whatever. So that's part of the reason why we're constantly trying to say, do I fit in? Like, I'm cool, right? We're all cool. I believe that stuff too, because we're afraid that if we say that I don't, now we're going to get booted out of the tribe and we're going to get devoured by a saber-toothed tiger. Only now it's not so much saber-toothed tigers, but it's the, I don't know, will my family disown me, or will I lose my job? And we have so much in social capital. We have stuff in rites of passage. I've had somebody that just beautifully talked about they don't want their rites of passage when they left the church to be my kids going to junior prom. They want it to be the baptisms, they want it to be the family experiences, but not if it's going to be this thing where they're made to feel bad. And so I feel like that's part of this work I love of Stages of Faith, is that, and this is where I always say, based on everybody's individual sets of values, back to that whole ACT part of values, I always say that there are some that maybe their unique set of values is one where they really don't feel like they can find a place in that community, and that's okay. Again, who am I to tell them that that's, well, you just need to do this? That would go against everything that we're talking about. But I find that often when people can kind of work toward their values, and if they have a sense of social capital or a sense of community, or these are my people, that then they can start to find more of a place in the faith. Let me lay out stage 5, and I want to come back to that. And please don't let me forget this one, because I want to get back to orthodox versus non-orthodox and that sort of thing, because I love that part. So stage 5, conjunctive faith. And there's even some stuff in what Fowler talked about. Fowler was pre-internet, so he said people usually don't hit the stage 5 until they're in their early 30s or later, and because they will have had so many years of experiences of stage 3 where they've had good experiences that they have enough that they can kind of build on to get through even the times where things don't feel very good. When maybe they're in a stage 4 position and their stage 3 leader makes them feel crummy. Had a little bit of that going on today, and I realized, man, I'm just going to go talk to you guys tonight and pretend to be this expert, and I'm training the church. I'm going to speak at this conference, and today I got a little bit fired up when somebody was questioning my stage 5-ness kind of a thing. So we're all human. So stage 5, rare for people to reach the stage before midlife, because typically there needs to be a significant amount of time in stage 3 to have the positive experiences from their faith community to draw from. And I'm telling you, I work with a lot of people in their 20s now, people that are at BYU or BYU Idaho, or people that have come home, or people that have come home from missions, it's hard. It's hard to work toward maybe like a stage 5 position when people haven't had a lot of those positive experiences maybe in stage 3. And I think that's why starting to get this message out more might be really beneficial. But this is the point where, and I love this is directly from Fowler, in stage 5, this is the point where people start to realize the paradoxes in life, that they begin to shed I guess I did add to this one. They begin to shed the what's wrong with me story and begin to embrace the story of life more as a mystery, and then they can revisit and re-examine sacred stories and symbols from their faith community now and appreciate the positive experiences without feeling either stuck in a theological box or feeling like they're going to be swayed by criticism from both stage 3 or stage 4 believers. So stage 5 is a place, I believe, full of empathy. It can be Christ-like love, compassion. It's a place for the stage 5 believer. Their job is not to, and I sometimes hear people say that that it may sound like I'm positioning this as better than or holier than thou. It's not. Again, if somebody is in stage 3 and that works, then bless their heart. If somebody's angry in stage 4, not even angry, if stage 4 feels more real to them because of their values, then I want nothing more than to have them find joy and happiness and not have the I'm broken story. But stage 5 can be a place where I'm not trying to change the 3, I'm not trying to change the 4, and I'm not trying to convince any of them that they're wrong. And so stage 5, you can't get there until you've been through those experiences. You can't get there until you've had the 3, until you've been through the 4. I get some people that say that they just want to tiptoe through 4 and jump to 5. And in this metaphor, I have people that often will dip a toe back into 3 every now and again. On this training that I will share with you, it's the weirdest thing. I can sit here and tell you guys about all this stuff, and then if I'm going to ride my Peloton bike on a Sunday morning, I'm still tempted to uncheck the box that says share it to Strava, because then some of my stage 3 folks are going to see it and go, he exercised?
On a Sunday.
I know, and I'm talking right here. On that one, I'm like, I don't know, man. That one stuff freaks me out, So it's fascinating. That one I'm trying to figure out myself. I need a little self therapy there. And then stage 6, one more, and then we're going to jump back. Stage 6 is called Universalizing faith, and it's rare for a person to reach this stage of faith. People at this stage have become important religious teachers because they have the ability to relate to anyone at any stage and from any faith. They're able to relate without condescension, but at the same time are able to challenge assumptions of those that other stages might have. And then Fowler said, few people reach this stage. Those who do live their lives in full service of others without worries or doubts. Typically people like Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Mother Teresa are thought of when stage 6 examples are given. I got ticked off 5 hours ago. I am not anywhere near stage 6, which I'm fine with that. So if we kind of jump back into those stages too, what I think is fascinating is that, so from a stage 5 faith place, then it really is a life full of mystery and paradox. You can return to your sacred stories and symbols without feeling stuck inside a theological box. What might that look like? When someone says, hey, you need to do this, and this is why I laid all that stuff out earlier, then I know, number 1, I'm going to have psychological reactance. I'm going to say, I actually don't want to do that. But number 2, I might not want to do that because that isn't in line with my value-based goals or I'm the only version of me that's ever existed kind of a thing. Sometimes I look back on being handed the whole faith crisis thing and faith journey thing when I worked for the church and me going, sure. And I think, it's because I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know I didn't grow up with the Orthodox belief. I didn't know all of those things, and I deal with so much around, pornography challenges and struggles and coping and that sort of thing. And I had a book a couple years ago about helping people with that. And when I was doing the little book tour, I counted up the number of individuals I've worked with. And at the time it was about 1,500 individuals. And I said, hey, shame has been a component in 0 parts of recovery. I'm over 1,500 and shame being a part of the recovery. So I feel like that's the part where even in stage 5, I feel like it's kind of that same thing where I don't find that shame piece being a very productive part in helping people grow. So I was about to say, hey, we can start wrapping this up. We got to talk about the whole marriage thing. This is huge.
Yes.
Right?
One quick question on stages of faith that was asked by Lisa Johnson is, can you define how the word faith is being used in these phrases?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Lisa, that's a great question. My first, what's going to sound like a cop-out for the evening, and this is what I love, right? So I'm not going to completely say faith is whatever you want to make of it, but stages of faith, that's why I laid out earlier, Fowler talks about stages of development, stages of emotional development, stages of spiritual development, stages of spirituality. So it kind of, this is, and actually that's a great segue to let's kind of talk about the way that this applies in marriage, is faith ends up being something that is different to each person based on their experiences. So to me, I would hear the concepts of faith, and I would hear, I would get into little debates even with people in my seminary class about, do you have faith that the M&Ms are in the bag, but you can't really see them, or do you have faith? And I would just get, this is going to sound mean. This is the first time I'm going to say that I want this to sound like with a bless its heart intention. But it's like, I kind of didn't care. About that version of faith or defining faith or that sort of, and that is nothing negative there. But that's where I feel like I want to know more about what faith would mean to you, Lisa. And I would say, hey, tell me more about that, which leads perfectly, as if I had even set this up, into what I now call It's my 4 pillars of a connected conversation. So, quick tangent back to those trying to fill these voids of people that were struggling with the challenges of turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms. I find this couples modality called emotionally focused therapy, EFT. And EFT, again, I cannot even believe what a game changer that is. I have to set this down because I have to use my hands a bunch, and for no reason. I mean, I'm going to do this a bunch. But so EFT is based on attachment theory, and attachment theory, I'm going to geek out for 3 minutes on this. So attachment theory means, okay, so we are all designed to have attachments and relationships with people, and that stems from the fact that we were all born from the wombs of our moms as little pink squishy babies, and we are programmed from the factory. If you want to say it's from God, if you want to say it's from the universe, or if you just want to say it just is, that we're 0 to 2 years old, that whole thing that kind of stays in line with the stage 0 1 of faith, is that we're designed to express and emote and scream and cry and get our needs met. So think about that. That is a factory setting, that when we express ourselves, people meet our needs. So as a baby, when you cry, people hold you and they feed you and they clean you and they comfort you. So and why I get so excited about this is I want you to think of it moving forward. So that's 0 to 2. 2 to, let's say, 7. Now I say welcome to the world of abandonment. So abandonment now looks like I want to stay up past 8, or I want candy before dinner, or I want to go to Disneyland, or I want toys, or all those things. So when you look at it now, as a parent, you're saying, well, you can't have everything, and I got to teach them a lesson. When you're moving forward from 0 to 2, your wiring is laid that you're saying, okay, wait, I express myself and people jump. What the heck? Like, I would like candy before dinner, please. And now I can actually kind of even say it. So why am I not getting candy? And so every kid is a little egocentric, unempathetic, center of the universe person. No judgment. This is kind of the way it works. And because it's coming from that factory 0 to 2 setting moving forward. So at that point, now, I say there's 2 different tracks that happen. And this stuff is so fascinating to me now in the world of attachment. And then we'll get to the couple stuff and we'll end big. So the abandonment track is that, so I've been expressing myself from birth and people meet my needs. Now I'm expressing myself, people aren't. And again, little kids don't understand without that empathy, and they can't self-advocate. All of a sudden they feel like, why is this not working? So that moves down later into life into what eventually leads, it's toxic shame. So it's if people are not meeting my needs, it's not imperfect world, imperfect people, everybody has stuff going on. It's what's wrong with me? So I must be unlovable, I must be broken, something's wrong with me. Remember, I'm not a big fan of the what's wrong with me story. So that comes from this abandonment path. And then the other thing that comes from childhood down the attachment path is the how do I get those needs met? So how do I show up as the scholar? Am I the peacemaker? Am I the athlete? Am I the rebel? Am I the moody one? And those all come from, I got to figure out how to express myself so that people will meet my needs. And those things, remember, coming from childhood forward, that stuff is just mind-blowing. And I remember, and I've said I have a lot of stuff out there recorded where I talk about, we all just want attention, positive or negative. I know as a therapist, I know to say that. And I would struggle with how to really land that plane. And I always tell some pretty lame story, the one I'm telling, right? Or I come home and everybody's busy and nobody will pay attention to me and the dog doesn't even care. And Wendy's cooking things and I'm picking things out of the pan and I maybe slap her bottom or whatever. And finally she goes, what? And that's where I thought I had life figured out. I'm like, oh, that's the negative attention that I crave. I just want some sort of interaction. So while that might be true, when you step back into what we're talking about right now, so if somebody if they only get attention when they are angry as a kid, or when they don't do their homework, or when they don't do their chores, and that's when they finally get told, hey, you exist, that's coming from this deep-seated stuff of like, okay, that's how I'm gonna get my needs met. Because if I don't get my needs met, that's abandonment, and abandonment equals death. Like that's the factory settings that we have. So now we show up as adults, and we got the abandonment path, which is the people aren't responding to me, my spouse isn't doing what I want them to, so what's wrong with me? I must be unlovable, I must be broken. No, you're human, and so is everybody else. And then we've been trying to figure out how to navigate or how to show up so that we'll get our needs met. And depending on if it's with our friends, do I got to be cool, or or if it's with my parents, do I have to be smart, or do I have to do all these things, or do I have to get angry, and then with our bishops at church, am I the Peter priesthood, or am I the kid that is inactive so everybody will come find me, or So we got all that stuff going on, and now we show up as adults and we try to put that stuff together, and we still have this childhood defense mechanisms and childhood programming going on of, okay, if my spouse is not meeting my needs, then something's up with me, and now I got to figure out how do I show up. But I want you now to be confident adults that can express their wants and needs, and we're not trying to figure out how do I do this in my congregation, how do I do this in my marriage, so that I'll get these needs met. No, I need to just show up, and this is where I talk about there's this we're either passive, or I feel like then we wait and now we get almost like aggressive, and there's this pendulum, and there's a sweet spot before that aggressive, which is calm and confident energy that we put off. And that only comes when you figure out my abandonment wounds, my attachment needs, my what matters to me, what are my value-based goals, when I really embrace I'm the only version of me, nothing's wrong with me. And so I hope you see how it all starts coming together, And now we show up in our relationships, and maybe we realize, okay, am I a truth person or a beauty person or a goodness person? But I don't have to try to withdraw to get my needs met. I don't have to get angry to get my needs met. I can just express that these are my needs. I did a podcast last week on interdependent relationships versus codependent relationships. And the healthy version, interdependent is saying, hey, we're two interdependent people. We're two of our own individuals, and we're coming into this relationship. And in couples, this couples model I love, this woman, Sue Johnson, who started it, said that we are designed to deal with emotion in concert with another human being. That doesn't mean that we're designed to tell the other person they're wrong, but if we feel safe and interdependent and like we're trying to figure out our abandonment and our attachment wounds, and this is my person now, that I want to be able to go to them and say, man, check this out. I'm finding myself feeling this way. And instead of our spouse saying, are you kidding me? Do you know how that makes me feel? Or do you know what that does to me? Or do you know what that, instead, now we get back to these, what I call my 4 pillars of a connected conversation. I feel like this is my opus. This is 10 years in the making, and this is based on emotionally focused therapy. Pillar 1 is you must assume good intentions. And it's that your spouse, nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I hurt my partner? So if your spouse is withdrawn, if they're hurt, if they're struggling because you just kind of unloaded some faith journey-like things on them, that it's not like they're, even if you feel like, wait, why are they not there for me? You can start to put all these pieces together. It's not because I'm unlovable or I'm broken. It's because, they're having their own experience. And so then and if they say, I can't believe you said that, even from a pillar 1, assuming good intentions, even if it's hard, it's that, okay, man, that they feel like that is the only way that they can express themselves, that maybe I will take them seriously, is that for them to withdraw, for them that they're in pain. And that will kind of lead to some empathy. So pillar 1, you have to assume these good intentions. Pillar 2 is you can't put off that message of I don't believe you, or that's a bunch of garbage. Because I hope you can start to see in every one of these pillars, if you don't adhere to these, you can see where the conversation will go south. If you started off by, okay, I'm assuming bad intentions, I think that they do want to hurt me, now we're already operating from our bunker and we're just firing shots at each other and that sort of thing. If you can assume good intentions, but then the person says, hey, you have really changed, we can't say, no, I haven't. Even if in our mind we think, I have not changed. If we say that, we're shutting the conversation down. So 2 is I can't put out that message that you're wrong, which leads to 3, which is you got to ask questions before making comments. I stole that one from Covey. That's the seek first, understand before being understood, which 1 minute or less for years, I thought that was in the Bible. Like, this is how an untruth person I was. And I even had a document that I had on my website that was this cool document that I was like, and I even went, I gotta own it. I even was like, it's gotta be Paul, probably said that. So I was like, as Paul said, seek first, understand. So one time I thought, I'm gonna Google it, and then it's like, oh, that's Stephen Covey, and I felt really dumb. But that's how much of a truth claim person I was, how much of a doctrinal scholar I was. 7 years of seminary, I never run into that scripture. I thought I had. But pillar 3 is ask questions before making comments, because you could even get assuming good intentions, and then they say that you're really hurting me, and then you could still say, okay, well, let me just tell you, I think that's ridiculous, and I can't believe you said that, but okay, let me hear what you have to say, right? You shut that conversation down. And then pillar 4 is you can assume the good intentions, and you can not tell them they're wrong, and you can ask a bunch of questions, and then you could still say, okay, fine, I'm the world's worst husband. I guess I'll never try to do anything again. So there's these 4 areas where you can really derail a conversation. And the biggest piece to this, and this is where I feel like we start getting into where this is in helping people navigate faith journeys, And in mixed faith marriages is the goal must be removed of to be right or to resolve. The goal has to be just to be heard. I promise you this is like a paradigm shifting, not as easy as it sounds, really difficult thing to do. That the goal is to be heard. So the questions, and Clarke had sent me some questions earlier about people that are talking about parenting. Parenting is a real struggle with a mixed faith marriage. And there are so many other ones about what do we do on Sundays, and what do we do about certain rules and these sort of things. And that these four pillars are built for that, because we want to resolve it right away. Why? We already covered that earlier. Our brain wants patterns. It doesn't like ambiguity. It doesn't like it wants all or nothing. It wants we got to figure this out now, because if we don't, then it will never be good, And that's just those hooks, your brain. You want a high five?
High five.
Yeah. No, yeah, Clarke.
I do want to say something.
Dude, please.
I feel like this is.
Remember how good that is? Clarke, I feel like.
You taught me that.
Oh, that was really impressive.
I feel like if I could go back 6 years in my life and know what these 4 pillars of conversation are, our trajectory would have been so different. Because I think we're conditioned in the church to doubt your doubts, and to not, and when you're starting to have those issues come up, you feel like you've sinned. You feel like you're sinning, and I'm broken. I'm broken. I'm doing all these wrong things. And so, I put myself in my wife's shoes. If she had come to me with the same issues and sort of bombarded them on me, I would have had this major how could you do this? You're wrong. You need to go do these things and all the shoulds. Yeah. And knowing these things now, it's I wish that we could. I wish that the church, or I wish that this type of information was available to people just in general. I don't know, in marriage, or just because I just see this same scenario in the church playing out over and over and over again the next few years, and we've all been through it, or we're going through it, and it's just playing over and over and over again in other people's households. Yeah. And there's no way. I wish we could prevent those types of
I'm trying, man.
Now we're 5-6 years into going to war, and now we're learning what these pillars are, so we can do it now. But it would have been so nice if we could have.
No, I appreciate that, and I want to jokingly say, well, Clarke, I just made them up, But I mean, I've been using them in therapy one-on-one for a long time, and I want you to. They're based on emotionally focused therapy, evidence-based models, and I just feel over and over again that it's so hard to not resolve. I mean, we're programmed to. Yeah, Sabrina.
I was just gonna say, I know that we're talking about a mixed faith marriage specifically, but I do feel like those pillars extend into everyday life. Yeah. Political conversations, religious, anything, and to use those 4 pillars when you're, to teach our kids, those things, it's just a life skill. And you know what I mean?
So much so that, I feel like I do. I want this everywhere. I want this model taught, in schools. Yeah. I really, that's where I start to feel okay, here comes my ego, but then I'm okay with that, and because
to Mormonism.
No,
everybody.
Sabrina's saying it's not unique to Mormonism. It's not. This is. I've got a marriage course that I just started. That this is all it's about, and I'm literally only week 3 into it, and it's everything I've always wanted it to be, because it's working. That people being, and it's not. Again, it's not easy, and that's where I laid out it's not the path. It's not the path of least resistance. It's really uncomfortable, and that's where I feel even in those stages of faith, and this is the part where I don't want anyone to feel like I'm saying anything is better than the other, but the part that I'm trying to noodle through in my own head at times, and again, I know this one might sound I worry that it might sound a bit offensive, but sometimes I feel when I'm going into that part about, we all want to feel a sense of belonging, we want a community, there's some pretty cool stuff out there that talks about every faith starts from an unorthodox belief, and then, somewhere around 150 to 300 years into it, I think it's Chaim Potok or one of these authors that wrote that then you kind of go through this. They didn't have Fowler's lingo then, but it's almost like a 3 versus a 5. I don't want to put it that way, but, the 3s, if the Orthodox kind of reigns supreme, then you've got maybe Amish or Hasidic Jews. You got some side curls and some cool buggies. And then, but if maybe the 5 kind of kicks in, then you've got, I look at the Catholic Church where you can have somebody taking the sacrament, and you can have somebody it's really feeling like it's the flesh and blood of Christ standing beside somebody that says that's a stale cracker and some warm grape juice, but they are a community and they're a people. And again, I don't want anyone to feel like if that doesn't speak to them, that's okay. I mean, that because that's their nature, nurture, birth order, DNA, nothing wrong with them, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I come from with that. And so those stages of faith, sometimes, this is where I was going a little earlier, and again, this is the stuff I'm just trying to work through, I feel like the last few months, is that sometimes I find that that the stage 4 version can almost, for some, they realize that almost does end up feeling more like the path of least resistance, because the unknown is that stage 5, because their whole life they've been told, no, you can't do buffet style Mormonism, or you can't do these things. So that is scary. And so sometimes I think that's where I'm saying that sometimes I watch somebody go down a stage 4 just angry, and stage 3 saying you don't get it, and then but that they don't find the end of that 4 path is feeling satisfying as well. And so that's just from an acceptance and commitment therapy standpoint, where it's talking about the brain wants path of least resistance. And again, I think you see why I'm tiptoeing around this, because I don't want anybody to feel offended, because it's not like you have to get to 5, you don't. But I find that, thanks for bailing me out of this, because I'm just going on.
So for me, this is something that I've given a lot of thought to, and I think maybe it would be helpful both for people who are on, the all-in with Mormonism end of the spectrum, and I don't want anything to do with it end of the spectrum, is, if faith is a word that has value to you, whatever that faith means, stage 5 doesn't have to mean I'm back at church with a temple recommend and paying tithing and holding a calling.
Yeah.
Stage 5 might mean that Eastern philosophy now is really appealing to you.
Yeah.
Stage 5 might mean that you want to join the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Stage 5, I in my opinion, an atheist could be a Fowler stage 5. It's just a way of expressing our faith development and our comfort with the stories and the system that we grew up with.
Yeah, that's very well said. And stage 5, you can wear super cool socks, and sometimes it's there's lots of benefits there. That was my primary and secondary emotions. My primary emotion right there was I worried that I was uncomfortable, so my secondary emotion was humor. There's another fun psychological fact, right? But thank you, that was so good. That really, because I believe that the Eastern philosophy piece is a big part of acceptance and commitment therapy, because when you find yourself going toward that, not toward the path of least resistance, when you recognize, oh, my brain's trying to hook me to the stage 5 would never work story, I'm glad you said that, because then the work that happens at that level is just trying to, recognize I have lots of thoughts going through my head, so why am I going to really attach or take hold of that one? They call it cognitive fusion. Why am I going to fuse to that thought when the next one that comes by might be, hey, I like carnitas, and the one after that one might be, I would think I want to go hang out with my kids, but sometimes we get caught up in this one that really feels intense, and then we're like, that one's true, but we keep moving ourselves back toward our value-based goal, which if that one's connection or compassion or love or acceptance or all of those things, which might be, speaking more toward the LGBTQT movement, or it's people that have really struggling with addictions or these sort of things, that if that's really in my wheelhouse, my values, and that's why I kind of laid out my whole journey in the 3-hour training that I can give a link to. I go really into that because I'm talking to 360 therapists, and I'm trying to say, look, let me give you this whole thing so that then when I say, and here's how I feel now, I hope I've already dispelled all you should. Well, why didn't you, because we've all been here for a lot of years to get to the point where we're at. And so, and with that whole time, our brain trying to make sense of things, trying to figure out things, all that abandonment attachment stuff, trying to show up so that we won't get left in the dust, so that we won't get eaten by, whatever. I already drew a blank. Sabers, tigers, and woolly mammoths. Thank you. Yeah. So those 4 pillars, and I think that I know I didn't give enough on that, and I'd love to maybe see if there's any questions, and we've gone for a while here. But I feel like the 4 pillars, though, the hardest thing with that one is it really is tell me your thoughts about when your spouse is saying, okay, the kids need to learn this way, or what are we going to do on Sundays? Or this is where I say we really need to step back when you commit to the goal is to be heard and not to resolve, to give some time to really try this new method of communication out, where it is I can't, I have to assume the good intentions. I can't tell them they're wrong. I have to ask questions, and then I have to stay present. And then you do that when that person feels heard. And this one I can't express enough. When somebody really feels heard, it is not just that we didn't fight. It's that you feel heard and that person heard you, and you walk away from a conversation now, and you will think now of, instead of thinking of, I can't believe they said it, here's what I should have said, it's, wow, I did not know that. So that's going to start to lead back to more of the, hey, tell me more about what it would look like if we did this, or what are your thoughts about this? Because now you've got a framework to communicate, and it takes practice and it takes time. And I mean, when I was creating the Magnetic Marriage course with my buddy Preston, who helped me put it together, at one point, man, he's just going, okay, but we call it, he would yeah, but everything. Well, yeah, but this, or yeah, but they say this, or yeah, but what about? And at one point I said, Preston, it's really easy. All you have to do is be a therapist for 15 years and have 7 years of daily mindfulness. And then this stuff is somewhat relatively kind of easy-ish. So I know that it's not as easy as I'm making it sound, but I promise you, it is the way to communicate. And I find that the opposite of this, the way that we typically are all doing it, we already know how that one works. And so this is where I say this does work. Sabrina.
So I just wanted to share an example.
Okay, good. Sabrina, share an example. Okay.
Oh, I was just thinking of this too.
Not to throw him under the bus, he is a wonderful husband.
Okay.
For a long
Great. Okay.
long,
I'm trying to point cameras. Okay.
long time, he would yab at me, all like when we would talk about something with church or the gospel or whatever. He'd be like, yeah, but I'm gonna go get the Doctrine and Covenants and show you how you're wrong, or he'll do that, whatever. And it was just like, I don't know, last week, I think it was, where he just listened to me, and I was able to like share my thoughts. It was particularly about like the afterlife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't get up and go, well, yeah, but it says here, or, this prophet said this in 1894, like, you know what I mean? And that he just listened, and he asked questions, and I felt heard.
Wow.
And it was literally like the first time, no offense,
No, it was.
did that. It was.
Yeah.
And when we were done with that conversation, I felt heard, and that was like huge, because he followed those 4 pillars, and he asked the questions, and he tried to understand me without, throwing his judgments or, his life story into it, because his life story is 100% valid.
Yeah.
But so is mine, And so, anyway,
That's beautiful.
like those 4 pillars are just huge. And like, I felt satisfied, I'm like, no, he really understands what I believe about the afterlife, or what, whatever it was,
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. For real. That's yeah. And I feel like, and I know we could do maybe a whole separate one on this with examples and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of people right now that I would imagine are hearing this, and they might be, well, yeah, but when we're this different, or yeah, but she said this in the past, or yeah, but, and that's where I say, absolutely, I understand that. But this really takes a commitment to be intentional about it. And some of the things that are fascinating too is that second pillar. What I also found out, which this one blew my mind, in particular with kids, teenagers, that sort of thing, is even sometimes when we're saying, look, you can do it, you can do hard things, we're telling the person that they're wrong. This one has nothing to do with the mixed faith marriage piece, but when the first time I really put that part together was I had a teenage boy who was talking about not wanting to take an advanced math class, and then I get his parents in and we're having this session, and then he's like, I don't want to do it, and they're saying you can do hard things, and then I drop him into this 4 pillar, and then in essence he finally says, okay, I heard you talking about finances, and it sounds like that I don't want to be the cause of you spending money on a tutor. And it was beautiful, because then they said, oh, we're talking about buying a second rental property. I think we can afford a tutor, but so, when him saying, I don't want to take this hard math class, and they're saying, you can do hard things, champ, they were communicating to him, you're wrong, you can. So once he felt heard, once it was I can express this, and instead of them saying that's ridiculous, they were saying, hey, tell me more, then it isn't always that easy, but it's pretty fascinating. And in EFT, what I base the 4 pillars on, what your goal is once you feel heard, you end up turning toward each other. And what that really means is, and I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but it can be as silly as you do the 4 pillars for everything. Even if it's where do you want to go to eat tonight? It can really be I don't know. It's like well, I feel like we do this, or I feel like on Friday nights that, when I was a kid growing up, that we always had tacos, or whatever it is. And when you feel heard on both sides, what turning toward each other looks like is at that point, then, your spouse saying, well, of course we're going to do that. Like, oh, I'm glad you told me. But sometimes when we feel heard, we're saying, no, we can do whatever you want to do. And I like to make the jokes that the fights almost become now about, no, I want to do what you want to do. Oh, no, we want to do what you want to do instead of the how dare you and I can't believe you said that. And so it really does. It takes practice. And I mean, I can talk about this stuff for hours about there are times where even if you know that person is wrong, I mean, even if you do, you cannot jump in and say you're wrong. And what that looks like is, I mean, I had somebody literally at one point have a whatever camera and they said that, oh, I can actually give a better one. I mean, this is one that you and I had. I said this on a podcast not too long ago, but
But I was right?
you were, yeah. I was
Just
right.
clarify.
Exactly. But I mean, it really was. And now I can't even remember. Thank you, ADD. But it was a concept of where I had said that I was doing something. You had said it was something interacting with my parents or taking the kids somewhere. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh no, okay. Man, I thought you had said this other thing. And in my mind, I was thinking, oh no, I know what I did. Like I know that I'm right on this. And then we were on a run, and then Wendy said, oh, okay, if that's kind of where you're coming from, then I can understand. I felt like when we were running by the gym that you had mentioned something about Jake and playing golf, and you guys would be done by 5. And at that point, it was like, oh, I forgot all of those things. So then I was like, okay, no, you are so right. We'll do what you want to do. And then she was like, oh, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page. And I just thought that was beautiful because in that moment, I knew I was right. And then it turns out I wasn't. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Do you want to field a couple questions
Yeah, let's
here?
do.
Okay. Can you repeat the names of the 4 pillars?
Yeah. And I have, let me tell you, boy, I'm the world's worst promoter, but if you go find my Virtual Couch podcast, I've been doing a lot of 4 pillar episodes. And so I go over them a lot there too. But the first one is that you just have to assume good intentions, that no one wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I hurt my partner? The second pillar is that you can't put off this message of, I don't believe you or you're wrong. And what I was kind of sharing there too is even if you know that person is, and I hope that makes sense where, if you just say you're wrong, now we go into that psychological reactance. Now we go into our bunkers. Now we're saying, oh yeah, well, you think you're smart about everything. But if it's like, I know they're wrong, but if it's oh, tell me about that. Tell me what you remember. And then you say, okay, man, I appreciate that because I feel like, when we were at the gym and you mentioned talking to Jake about golf, because then I'm not in my bunker, I'm not dug in, I'm not trying to think of all the times that she was wrong. Instead, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. So that one's, not putting off the message that you're wrong. The third pillar is questions before comments. And that one's just, bless you. That one's really important because the questions before comments, sometimes again, and I really feel like, and I get to hear this one all the time and it just warms my heart, where people will realize which one of the pillars that they did not follow, or that that broke down on them after a conversation that didn't go well. And so that third one is we can assume the good intentions, we cannot say you're wrong, and then we have to ask questions. And this is where I feel like people will often say, well, what if I already know the answers? And I mean, that one's a therapist layup. That one's oh no, you don't, but somebody hasn't felt safe enough to be able to express themselves. So, you really want to say, tell me more about that. I even did an episode a long time ago where I had a bunch of stuff about 30 empathetic statements. Because sometimes guys are really good at the, tell me more about that. Now tell me more about that. And tell me more about that. And sometimes that does feel a little bit rote. How long have you felt that way? Tell me more. What's going, when did you first start thinking about that? How difficult is that for you? Where has that shown up in your family? Or are there other times where I've maybe done something similar? And it takes practice. And this is focus. Fourth pillar, stay present, right? Don't run into your bunker. And that's the one where I feel like too often you could get through those first 3 and then say, fine, I guess I won't ever try to buy you any presents anymore. That was one of the last ones I talked about. I bought Wendy a super cool stand-up Mrs. Pac-Man game. Turns out she didn't really want it. And that was hard.
I remember that one.
Yeah,
podcast,
that was hard. And so when she said that, I was like, I had to assume good intentions. I asked her questions. Tell me about that. Or I had to say, you're not wrong, even though I thought you were. And then I asked questions. And then she was like, oh, I really don't like it. And if we're going to spend that money, then we need to get something for the kids, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And then the fourth one was then I wanted to say, okay, well, I guess I'll never try to buy presents again. So, I mean, you got to stay present with that. So those are the 4 pillars. And I was going to go on a tangent. our rally.
No, that's good. There's a bunch of questions. We'll just go to the next one.
Okay.
And how do we stop trying to resolve things? Isn't that good to compromise and talk through differences?
What a good question.
I think, I don't know if your 4 pillars covered that, but
No,
yeah,
well, it
that
does.
was
So
the question.
to be heard is and this is where I can speak to my experience of. Here's what I say. I sound so arrogant. I only know of the thousands of couples I've worked with and the data I've received. That sounds so arrogant. But my point is this: that compromise was one of the first things I learned. That compromise really isn't necessarily an evidence-based model. It makes so much sense, but compromise is often that we want things resolved. And so I feel like, compromise oftentimes does feel like more of the path of least resistance. We have to figure this out. But in the grand scheme of things, this is trusting an entire new process of being heard. And that being heard, you may not get to compromise right away. And I often do this kind of a silly-ish thing where I just say, all right, if you put when you really feel heard, I have this visual in my head of it's almost like stacking your truths up. So if I have somebody saying that, gosh, I don't know why some of the examples are leaving my head right now, but if it's something about, tell me your thoughts around, let's say, celebrating Christmas. And, that is a good one. So, all right, growing up, I did not do much with Christmas. My parents would head over to Wendover, and then my brother and I would go sneak into all the movies, like all the time. So we'd open up our presents on the night before so that they could get a start. I thought that was what Christmas was. So then I'm dating my wife, and then she says, come over, and you can hang out all day. And I said, okay. And I thought, but now I'm missing all the movies.
Let's go to Wendover.
When do we go to the movies? That sort of thing. So then when we're talking, as we get to be having kids, then it's like, hey, tell me your thoughts around Christmas, opening presents on Christmas Eve, or tell me your thoughts around. And so when I'm sharing, we used to open up everything the night before, so my parents would go to Wendover, and I would go to movies. My truths are about this high. And then when my wife shares that, man, for me, it was this magical time where we had these rituals, and we would sing, and we would make whatever gingerbread houses, and we would have someone read the Nutcracker, and all these sort of things. Her truth stacked so far up that the last thing I was going to do was say, okay, let's do this. Let's open up stuff and let's go to movies and we'll read the book. Like, I feel like that's kind of where we're going with a compromise. But when I really felt heard and then I understood where she was coming from, then that was the part where I said, I'm all in on your stuff. I did say we should watch The Christmas Story, and she still doesn't like that movie, and that's fine. We married 30 years. But I feel like that's an example of the compromise. I didn't necessarily want compromise at that point because to Wendy's credit, she's like, no, we could do the other stuff, even though probably in her mind she's thinking, are you kidding me, right? Right, okay. But so that's a great question. And again, I can annoyingly start to say things like trust the process and that sort of thing, because it really is not, again, if we talk about brain patterns that we have, our pattern is to try to resolve, and our pattern is to work through compromise. And so all I'm saying is, in this scenario, I would challenge you to just give it some time to intentionally just be heard, and then the more you feel like you can communicate, what Sabrina was talking about, or I watched some Netflix thing on death a couple weekends ago, and it was fascinating to have a great conversation with you, where I don't know, it was nice to say it was this episode that had stuff about reincarnation and all that kind of stuff, and we were just talking about it. And Wendy's kind of fitting it into maybe a church, like a home. I wonder how that would fit into the church here. And in my brain, I was thinking, well, I hadn't even thought about that, And so I left that conversation, and I thought more about that, even though that wasn't even part of what I wanted you to think how cool it was that some little kid ends up being a fighter pilot, but he's only 3 years old. And you're saying, how does that fit into the gospel or the plan of salvation? And so I've been thinking about that a lot. We haven't talked about it since, but so I feel like that's a great example. Yeah, you gonna say something? My wife never talks, and I like talking, but I would never put her on the spot. Yes.
I think your goal is not to resolve. That resolution comes as a byproduct of doing the work behind.
I think so, but then I feel like I'm, yeah.
And I think it's not always a perfect.
No.
You do A, B, C, and D, and then you get this.
Yeah.
But I do think it becomes a byproduct of learning to communicate that way.
Yeah.
And letting like Sabrina said, letting your goal be to be heard. Let that happen, and then watch what happens.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Wendy, and because I do feel like there's a lot of other things I say often in this model of is your goal connection, or is it to be right? Is your goal to be heard, or is it to be right. You know, I mean, you kind of see a theme going on, right?
Yeah.
And we missed a whole thing here tonight, and I don't want to keep us longer, but on that part I touched on a little about this, when we really figure out our abandonment, our attachment wounds and things that, and you know, I've been doing this one a lot with Wendy lately, of where I can have a disagreement or have my own opinion, and I'm so afraid that it's going to sound like I'm being mean or a jerk that I will say, oh, I disagree, and I'll say, how'd that feel? Like, was that one good? Right? Just like, you're good, you know. But that we're almost not kind of programmed. I mean, people call it nice guy syndrome at times, right? But it's like, you know, and I feel like whether it's nice guy or nice girl, but it's really learning how to when you've got this interdependent relationship instead of a codependent relationship, and you realize you're the only version of you, and you learn that you can, that those attachment and abandonment wounds now as an adult. I just did an episode where I talked through with a couple. They're an amazing couple, and the wife was very upset that the husband had forgot her birthday party or her birthday. And so then I said, okay, under this new abandonment and attachment is fixed, assuming good intentions, 4 pillars model, then, you know, if you really want your birthday to be a big deal, then a week out, you get to confidently say, hey, everybody, my birthday's in a week, start buying presents, you know, because I can't say that, wow, if he doesn't meet my needs, then something's wrong with me. I have to understand maybe he's overwhelmed. Maybe he's got a lot going on in his mind. And that's the way that you're going to have somebody in the future then start to do a better job of remembering the birthday or that sort of thing. Okay.
A couple of these maybe 2 more questions.
Okay.
So this one comes from an audience member. Would love to get your take on the involvement of ultra orthodox parents, as they often get involved in mixed faith marriages, and how to deal with that. And then another one saying, yes, please respond to that with in-laws and boundaries.
Yeah, so, all right, this is so good. And maybe I'll do a whole podcast on this one, because I've been getting a lot of requests about things around boundaries, because boundaries are really hard. And I feel like the boundaries, laying out a lot of the things that we talked about tonight, and this is where I'm really trying to work more into that calm, confident energy of sorts, that we often feel like we have to defend, or we often feel like we have to engage. But the more we realize that we are our own unique people, and that we are, and this is where I start to feel like sometimes, you know, not engaging, we feel like we're letting someone get away with something. But ultimately, we're in charge of our marriages, we're in charge of our relationships, we're in charge of how we raise our kids. And so it can feel awkward at times to not engage with a ultra-Orthodox in-law. But I feel like some of the best things that we can do is to not engage. And this is where I overuse the phrase, bless their heart. You know, bless their heart, they want me to know something that I'm supposed to do. And that's where I'm really, this is only been the last 2 weeks right in my head. I just keep saying, how cute, like how adorable. And I know it's not that easy. Well, I mean, we've got some stuff with maybe my parents, you know, where it's hard. It's hard, and I still find myself at times engaging, expecting a different result. And then I have to just realize, oh man, bless my heart. Like, I was really trying. That would have been great. But feeling like at times we get, you know, when somebody says, you need to do this and you should do this, and if you don't do this, where sometimes the best response that we can do is just say, hey, I appreciate that. Like, that was kind of, you know, do you have thoughts?
Well, I just think that ultimately is where everything comes together with, to speak to kind of what you said earlier about being in stage 5, it's really, to me, I would call it like Christ-like love.
Yeah.
Because that is what that resonates with me. To somebody else, it might be a different type of feeling or whatever. But it's saying you think what you want to think. Like, I 100% support you in thinking what you want to think. This works for me. Mm-hmm. And I like how this is working for me, and I appreciate that works for you.
Yeah.
And bless your heart, power to you. Like, you go with that, but allow me to go with this. I mean, we're all on our own path and our own journey, and allowing that unconditional, real, true love to just be like, it's hard when it's your parents and you want to be like, oh my gosh, how could you do this to me? Or how, you know, and to just be able to say, bless you, like, thank you, like, I understand that about you. Give me the same, understand this about me.
Yeah.
You know, and just love and not judge. And if you want to do it that way, great, but we're going to do it this way because this works for us.
Yeah, and that's my wife. Oh, that's so good. Okay, and I feel like and that's so good because I'm going to say it's not easy, and that's why I feel like I don't want to say the last piece of the puzzle to click lately, but it is that abandonment attachment stuff. Because what is that? What are we trying to do? We're trying to say, man, I got to still have this programmed. I got to feel how to get heard and noticed and accepted by my parents, because if I wasn't when I was a kid, I'm abandoned, and abandonment equals death. Well, now I'm an adult, so they can say that stuff, and that's awesome. And that is scary, because that's why I laid out the whole thing about that from zero on, from birth on, because we often look in hindsight of, oh, that's me trying to please my parent. I need to not do that. But I like to give ourselves a little bit of forgiveness on that and say, oh wow, that is rooted in my core, in my very soul, where I am now a 51-year-old man, and I did this a couple months ago, where I still found myself, I didn't even know till after the fact too, that I had thrown out this, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then when I didn't get the response that I thought, I thought, oh wow, I was still throwing out this, hey, do you guys like me? Like and then when they didn't respond the way I wanted to, my first thought was, what's wrong with me? And I thought, oh yeah, this is what I do for a living. Come on, I'm okay.
Therapize yourself. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
This is a really good question here. During step 3, and I'm assuming this is the third pillar of faith, when there's, ask questions, at what point is it inappropriate to share information, i.e. church history, that the spouse doesn't know about? Would that be an inappropriate thing to share during that? I think that's what the question is kind of getting at.
It's a really good question. And this is where I really say that this becomes a marathon and not a sprint, actually an ultra marathon and not a sprint, because we have to reestablish this pattern or this safety in being heard. And so I feel like, because I do now, at least every day, one or two couples a day, I'm working with this in my practice. So I've seen this just play out over the long haul. And we often want to get to those things of what I know early. And so this is where I want to say, just give yourself some time of this new model of communicating to be heard, and then being able to say, man, tell me more about that, to maybe let the person that doesn't know the things and then even just from okay, I can understand that if that's where they're coming from, then I can understand maybe why they wouldn't want to hear more, or the things that I want to share. Now, when I do these 4 pillars, there's a speaker, there's a listener. So after the speaker, let's say that it's the person that maybe doesn't want to hear all the things that and they share, here's why I don't, or here are my thoughts, and then they feel heard. And now you as the speaker and them as the listener, we want them adhering to those same 4 pillars. And if that's the case, oftentimes that's where, I want them to assume good intentions from you. I want them to not tell you that you're wrong. And in that 3, sometimes I can say things like, man, there are things I would love to share, but I do worry that it might not be as productive, based on some of our things in the past. Now, when it's framed that way and we're being heard, that's where I would go back to that. We're going to lean in toward each other more. That might be one where someone might then be able to say, okay, no, I appreciate that. Maybe we can share some things, or maybe I'm okay with hearing a little bit. But I feel like that when the reactance thing's there and you need to understand, I just have to get this out there. I hope that tonight I've kind of laid out of how we can understand why that one maybe isn't as effective. I have another thought around that too. Okay. So back to I find this one often too, that whole brain and all or nothing thinking. And I find that with a lot of couples, when we do get these 4 pillars in place, that you do find often that, this one's so common, where let's say the person that maybe hasn't done as much of the research or the digging into things, church history, that sort of thing, where they have their doubts too, but they're afraid to give any of that information because, they're afraid now that their spouse will go into that all or nothing, black or white thinking and say, okay, good. So now let me just tell you all the things. Or they're afraid that if they say, man, I've questioned a couple of these things too, that then their spouse is going to say, well, then why are you even in? Why aren't you just having all the conversations with me? And so we just do that black or white thinking so often that this model, I think, is really primed to be able to just have more of these conversations and not trying to fix or judge. And the goal is to be heard. And then it's also to respect that other person has their own experiences. And this is where I can make everything sound like, and then rainbows happen and unicorns and everybody's happy. But over time, I have found that is the way to get to more of these kind of conversations, when people feel safe and they feel heard. That's kind of where we can get to. That's a great question.
Yeah, I think in the conversations that we've had, it's come up because in order for me to share, like I was geeking out on Book of Abraham earlier in the summer. And so that was when we were kind of talking about these, okay, I need to be able to communicate, but in the back of my mind, and I think we talked about this when we went out to dinner the other night, where subconsciously I was still trying to convince, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. And I think I want to say, I know I'm the PM here, but I feel like maybe you've mentioned this in a podcast, but the active member still, I think Jennifer Fife maybe said this, is that the active believer still reserves the right to not be convinced of the truthfulness of the church in those conversations. And I don't know if that's something that you...
I mean, I think that I would love to take credit for that one too.
But I do remember hearing that, and I think, I just think it's important to point out that if we're still trying to change, then we're not doing that third step correctly.
Absolutely.
And so and that's hard. It's all about listening and being curious about the other person, but not to the detriment of your faith, if that's what the person chooses.
Yes, because again, this is a long game. This is my person. This is, they have their own experiences. And I feel like this is the method to get to those. A lot of times I have people say this concept of where they say, yeah, but I'm worried that we'll still be in the same place in a year unless I have these conversations. And that's where I want to say that's the brain doing the all or nothing thinking. If we start having this to be heard kind of conversations, things are going to look so different in a year. So, and I didn't even mention that. In acceptance and commitment therapy, one of the coolest things is you start noticing the brain wants to orient with the present by ruminating about the past and by worrying about the future. That's just what it's designed to do. So a lot of times we'll say, yeah, but in the past, this is what happened. And the only thing the best thing we can do is to say, it totally did happen. Just diffuse that. Or in the future, what if this happens? It's like, I totally don't know. That's a great question, brain. But right now we can have these connected conversations. And so the more we do that, I'm also on this like one man mission to talk to every state president in the world, and kind of and I've had a great conversation with one locally where it was someone that there has been some infidelity and addiction, and now I'm working with this guy, and he's finally like, okay, he's going to deal with all of his stuff, and it's amazing. And so then I get to talk to a state president, and it was so cool because it was a super stage 3 state president, but he's nice. And the first thing he says is, okay, I just got to make sure this guy's not in the same place in a year, And so I said, I do my pillars. Tell me more about that, President. What's that like, right? And then by the end of it, it's like, man, I hear you and I appreciate that. But if we work on the person really being heard and kind of dealing with these attachment abandonment things and filling these voids and turning away from and not expecting perfection, all these things with the addiction piece, then I don't know. I don't even care about what we're going to look like in a year, because it's going to be completely different. Now, if we're constantly going, I'm worried about a year from now, I feel like we're still operating with a little bit of that shame dust all over us, and that one's not going to be very helpful. So, okay.
Last question. Everybody, one last question, I promise. I think this is a good one to end on. Your thoughts on what the church could do to make mixed faith marriages work better or be healthier. I think it's fair to say no one here has been to a mixed faith marriage fireside that the church has put on. Yeah. Or a class or a Sunday school or heard a conference talk. So this is kind of cool that we're involved in this. I love it. And I'd love to see more. So is there something that you feel like the church could do to sort of champion what we're, our community? Right? And this is where I feel like, and I can't speak for the church, but I mean, I got to train all the church therapists. That to me was fascinating on Stages of Faith. That's why at the beginning of this meeting tonight, I said it was really cool because they reached out to me, and then I kept saying, like, you've heard the stages, you heard my podcast, right? The Stages of Faith stuff? Yep, okay. And then I got to meet with maybe another level up, and I would say, you guys totally know what I'm talking about, right? Like, we're all on the same page. And then I did it, and it was 3 hours, and it was amazing. And I've got a transcript, it's 39 pages long of that whole thing. And then what happened next was I get contacted and said, hey, can you now present at this Utah Mental Health Association conference? So this is all me saying this, but I feel like I was able to kind of talk a bit internal, and now I was encouraged to hey, let's kind of get that stuff out there. So, I'm excited about it. That's part of why I wanted this thing recorded, because I would love for this stuff to be out there. I really would. Absolutely.
Yeah. But thank you. That went long.
Right.
So thank you, everybody
Yeah.
that was listening. That I really am grateful for this opportunity. And you guys, thank you so much for hosting this.
Absolutely.
And thanks for, marriage on a tightrope. I mean, I appreciate all of this.
Do we
I
clap?
think we'll clap. Yeah. I'll let you have your seat back.
Thank you.
So I just want to say thanks everybody for coming. I wanted to give everyone one last chance to ask a question, but I know we've gone over 2 hours. So we're going to be hanging out for another half hour and chowing down on some food. And this is for you.
Oh, is that a cookie?
It might be a crumble cookie.
Thank you.
Might be a little something for you and Wendy in there.
Thank you.
But so thank you to Tony. Thank you for everybody for coming. Thank you to the Sacramento Spectrum, aka the Transitioning and Postmortems of Sacramento, for pushing or hosting this. And also thank you to Alan and Katie Mount for pioneering this this marriage on a tightrope movement and sort of paving the way for events like this. And promoting the event online, because we got a bunch of people that tuned in and listened. So thank you for all for your support. And we're going to chow down now. So yeah.
Okay.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody.